Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the DarwinFPV CineApe25. CineApe just doesn't roll off my tongue. Cine doesn't roll off my tongue. So as far as my videos go, hopefully it just matters that we understand each other, whether I pronounce something exactly right or not. In this case, if I say quad or CineApe or CineApe or CineWhoop or CineWhoop, talking about this one. The motors are DarwinFPV branded 1504 3600 kV, and the props are the HQ T63 MMX6, meaning they got 6 blades, so they have a little bit more of a whistling sound to it, but you'll get to hear that in the flight audio, in the flight footage, which there is a ton of. The flight controller, which is this lower board here, is the F411. It does have an MPU 6500. To finish off that long old name, AT7456E. And then we have an ESC up here as well, but I'm not finding the spec rating. I believe it's a 30 amp, at least I thought I saw that at one point in time. So that's different. We oftentimes don't see a 2-layer stack with these CineWhoops. So we went away from the all-in-one, 2 different flight boards here, which when it comes to replacing your parts, that is a benefit. The board with this button here, this is the Walksnail 1S VTX. And of course, it's got the Walksnail Nano camera up here as well. As you can see, the motor wires aren't secured down. So when they assemble these, they have to make sure that they're short enough to where the motor wires don't get down into our props. But you could always take some tape and loop it around here. Technically, this can be flown without the prop protection, and they kind of tout a quick release, but there are a lot of screws that have to come out for this quick release. I don't call that a quick release by any stretch. I believe I counted at one point in time. I think there's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, and one more right here. Yep, 7. I do think this prop protection is going to be very robust. It reminds me a lot of the material used on the CineBot 30, which also was very robust. Yeah, I didn't have any problems with durability. And wherever the prop protection is supported, it uses a metal, all metal, and long screws right through the prop protection into the carbon fiber frame. Speaking of, that carbon fiber looks to be a full 2.5 millimeters thick. And while we got the calipers out, looks like it's 112.5 millimeters, or pretty close to 112 millimeters. It does come with 2 battery straps, and for a longer battery, that will be extra handy. You have extra slots here in the carbon fiber, which you can place those battery straps. I went with the 2 rear ones because I am using an 850 milliamp 4S battery, which I felt gave me good flight time and also gave me some good performance, as you'll see in the faster flight footage. Got a 3D printed mount that is not only holding our FPV camera, but it also holds the ability to mount an external HD camera as well as our USB port. We take out the little plug and you can see our USB-C port right there, so easy access. The access to the binding button on the Avatar VTX is a little bit challenging, but it's still exposed enough to where I was able to accomplish it without taking anything apart. The port to get your flight footage from off the Avatar VTX, it's a little bit more challenging. You've got to get a right angle, and you can get it in there, again, without taking anything apart, but it's just not easy to get it in there, and you might need a tool, such as a hex driver, to kind of solidify that connection by pushing that connector fully in. You can see here I've got a Foxeer ELRS receiver on here. This was sent to me as plug and play, so I had to add my own receiver. But on their website, they do show that they have the ability to send this to you with an Resellers receiver, as well as an R81 receiver. And while we're looking at the bottom, yeah, we got a bottom carbon fiber plate with these little foot pads. Initially, I had troubles with one of the foot pads staying on, but after I cleaned the carbon fiber and reapplied it, it stayed on through all my flights. It weighs just a touch over 160 grams. If you were to add an external HD camera as well as a power lead, it comes into a little over 211 grams. I did fly it on this AO line or Gold Line 850 milliamp 4S battery. Many times people say that battery looks puffy. No, it's still solid. It's just that this size of battery is oftentimes kind of roundish. I have multiples of these and they all look the same, whether fresh out of the box or well loved. And with that battery, it comes in at 257.3 grams. And if we add back our naked camera as well as the power lead, we get 308 grams. In the box, we do get a little accessory pack, which has a couple of stickers, some foam pad that we can put around the outside, as well as a baggie of little screws. And last but not least, we get a full sheet of stickers. This review has been a long time coming. It suffered from my poor weather and a busy schedule. You can see me in the bottom left, sitting over there with my red shoes on, which some people have noted that in the Velocidrone map that Boner FPV made of the house in the backyard, that there should be a pilot sitting there in red shoes. Apparently, I'm becoming known for my red shoes. I actually like those shoes. They're Brooks. They're really comfortable. I got Brooks shoes because actually when I was getting physical therapy on my shoulders, I noticed that all the therapists were using Brooks. And so I asked my therapist, like, why has everybody got Brooks on? And he goes, because they're great shoes and they're really good for being on your feet. I work in a really large facility, so I oftentimes have to do a lot of walking. And because I do a lot of walking and there's no dress code, so to speak, I got a pair for myself, and I've really enjoyed those. If you haven't tried a pair of Brooks shoes, you might give them a go. I'm not trying to sell you on a pair of shoes, but because they've been noted, I thought I'd talk about them just a touch. As printed on screen, this is the 850 milliamp Forest battery, which I use consistently through all this flight footage, although it's different batteries that could be different manufacturers, but they all have the same shape and size. I think they're all the same. I suspect they're all kind of G&Bs. I've got RDQ branded ones, G&B branded ones, Emax branded ones. So anyways, I have a bunch of those batteries. And you see the flight time down there is 5 minutes and 15 seconds. This is the all-up, what I showed you on screen with the naked GoPro, the balance lead that you need to power the naked GoPro, as well as the quad itself. So a good amount of weight there at 308. And also my flight audio comes from a secondary camera. It does not come from the quad itself. That is stationed near me on the table, and that's where we get our flight audio from. Oftentimes I'm asked about which one's louder. That is something that I leave for you. It's very subjective, and I don't think I can tell you which one is louder. And I think sometimes I get some pushback when I don't respond directly with comments of saying which one's louder. I would have to measure them and include that measurement, the audio measurement that is, in these videos, because if I haven't flown a CineWhoop in a week or two, I can't remember how it sounds, and I'm not going to drag every CineWhoop I have every time I have a CineWhoop review to do and to get a feel for just the sound. So go back to the video. I'm very consistent about recording flight audio, and listen for yourself. To me, my ears, this one doesn't sound as loud, but it has a little bit more of a whistle, which might carry. So food for thought, but again, go back and watch the other videos. The consistency amongst my audio recording should be there in order for you to make your own identification of which one is louder. I don't think we have to watch all of this. I've already kind of done a few things. Descending is one of those things when it comes to CineWhoops that I like to do because not all of them descend very well, and you'll see in a faster flight, this thing actually flies really well for what it is. I'm not saying that an unprop protected quad doesn't fly better. I'm saying for something in this category, like a CineWhoop, this one flies really well. Matter of fact, I would say that of all of them that I've flown, this one and the CineBot 30 are the two best flying as far as tracking. And when I say tracking, I'm referring to you're just trying to get it to go into a direction and you don't feel like you have to force it. It just kind of goes where you tell it to go. And I am referring to telling it to go not through mental control, but rather the radio and the control link that we have. So this one flies really, really nicely. But let's move on to another flight. We don't need to watch all 5 minutes, so this is going to be a huge, long flight. Okay, this is an inside flight. This will be louder, so I will bring the normal audio level back up here for about 10 seconds so you can get a feel for how loud it actually is inside. Okay, I think that's enough. Again, on screen, we are watching the naked GoPro flight footage. You will be able to see the Avatar VTX footage in our faster flight because I take the naked GoPro off. I can't really risk crashing that, although this is risky. I think this gets closer to being indoor friendly, but it's going to need to be a somewhat large space, or your skill set is going to need to be there to where you can comfortably fly a 2.5-inch prop quad inside the space. It's not something I would recommend if you're starting out, but if you're fairly adept at flying, obviously it can be done. I'm doing it. I'm nothing special. I have been flying a good long while, but yeah, it's still, I'm not exactly smooth. You might use this for real estate fly-throughs, or you're just at a museum and you've been hired for something like that. I know there's a lot of people out there that like these for, it seems to me, at least two different reasons. One, you just like the slower pace of flight, but you still like the FPV sense, and you want a prop protected quad for safety purposes by chance. Maybe it's just peace of mind. And others are using them for actually filming footage, whether it's recreational filming footage or commercial filming footage. So this is one that I think if you're in a large indoor space, you could fly this inside with a naked GoPro, with an 850 milliamp battery. Oddly enough, my flight footage, or my flight time, excuse me, came down to 4 minutes and 46 seconds. So that's a curiosity, but even though it's the same size battery, what that does show us is that not all batteries are equal, even when they might be the same brand, make, and manufacturer. It has a lot to do with our care of the batteries. How many times have they been discharged too low? How long have they been kept charged too high or too low? Just our overall battery maintenance. This particular battery has apparently taken some abuse by my own hands, so that's my fault. I fully expect that on the equal battery that you would get more flight time in the inside flight footage than you would on the outside flight footage, so keep that in mind. But again, I probably wouldn't have stayed with this. I flew this probably 6 times inside if it didn't track so well. And I kind of included this footage mainly in, I was desperate to fly, and it's been, our weather got better for a short period of time, but we got snow again today. So I was desperate to fly. I decided to fly it in the house, and it tracked really well when I was outside, and I had some pretty good confidence that I would be able to handle it inside without doing any damage to our home. But always be careful. Consult those you live with before flying quads inside. Make sure they're okay with it as well. Maybe convince them with your outside flight skills. All right, next up is our faster flight, and then we'll do the crash footage, which there isn't a lot of, but I do have some. All right, this is our onboard VTX recording. Again, no GoPro, so this is the Avatar recording, which is in HD 1080p. It is a little bit fussy to get off of there because the little connector that you need to get in there and connect via USB to your computer is a little tough, but again, it's accessible. And yeah, that happened a lot. It's just the amount of weight that you have, it takes some getting used to when doing those dives. So I decided to include this. You'll see this in a few more times in my crash footage. A little flip to make sure my props are okay and I haven't lost a blade. Usually when you lose a blade on these seriously multi-bladed props, you can tell right away. But I'm gonna do another dive a little bit later. You just have to pull up sooner. You have to give it more throttle. So it doesn't dive great, but it doesn't wash out, which is a big deal because most of these tend to wash out. Also, it doesn't have that wobble that we oftentimes get in these, or we've recently been getting in these, when you're at zero throttle. So if you're at the top or at the apex of your punch up before you turn your nose down, and then you get your nose down and it wobbles back and forth. For those of you that have been watching the videos that I've made here, that's some testing that I kind of stress because we've been seeing it. We actually saw it on the Foxeer 3.5-inch quad as well, that it did it and it didn't even have prop guards. So that to me indicates a tuning issue that DarwinFPV has taken care of, or at least they seems to have taken care of, because I had 2 days of really nice weather, and I spent that outside flying this guy, and I enjoy it. I think this is one that if you're looking for an overall CineWhoop type of quad and you're needing it to have a fairly wide envelope of flight capabilities, this is one you definitely want to look at. You may want to look at it more seriously because DarwinFPV has kind of made their niche in the market to be budget friendly. And this is no exception. This doesn't come in at a huge cost. They actually have RTF kits as well, so you can buy this in various flavors that they have to offer with different radios, also goggles, and you can get it with. You can get this kit with the Avatar goggles and a Zorro, which I am using the Radio Master Zorro radio to fly this, and you essentially have the same sort of setup. But the goggles I'm using are the VRX with the HD0 goggles. So that is something to note there as well. So if you already have goggles that have HDMI input, you don't necessarily have to buy the Avatar goggles in order to use Avatar. You can get the Avatar VRX, plug that in through HDMI in on your goggles, and you should be relatively good to go. Of course, all goggles have different sort of screen capabilities, so you may find it stretched, you may find it widened, you may find that you can't do 1080p at 100 frames per second, or you may find that you're stuck in at 720p. So there are variables to that. I think either through my own discussions as well as Joshua Bardwell, as other counterparts that make FPV videos. We've probably exhausted that. I hope we've exhausted that. I know I relied a little bit on JB and his testing. I haven't watched his video, but I did see his thumbnail, which indicated that he had done a bunch of testing with the Avatar VTX, as well as a bunch of different goggles, and hopefully he had some good and interesting findings for the community there. But you can see I do a number of those punch-ups, and I still get some of that drift away, that zero throttle drift away, which is always something I'm looking for, even lower end of the battery. So that it could wash out. So if you go up, hundreds of feet, or maybe even only 50 feet, I can't tell you for certain. I know the chimney on our house, I think, comes in at about 35 feet. So if you go up to, say, above 50 feet, you may find that you reach terminal velocity at some dive and that it does wash out. If you're not familiar with washout, it's kind of an uncontrolled maneuver or an unintended maneuver to where it pitches up, so the nose comes up on its own, and then it usually yaws one way or another. To me, I usually find it yawing to the right. You can recover from it, but it's very shocking when it happens. Hopefully you're familiar with that, because if you're not, watch some of these other CineWhoop reviews that I have on my channel, and you'll get further discussion on that. But the flight time at 442, an aggressively flight time at 442, we have a little bit less weight with the GoPro, or the naked GoPro, not being on this quad. I thought that was pretty good, pretty acceptable. And we're going to come in for the end of the flight, and I've got my red shoes and my khakis on, just to indicate that, yeah, it was a different day than the inside flight. No, I didn't dress for flights. Just a couple of crashes here. Putting together a crash reel when you have weeks worth of flight footage, it's a pretty tedious task. Unfortunately, some will be disappointed that I don't have flight audio. That's an additional task. And these crashes, although there aren't very many, I just wanted to cover a few of them, from the most mild when I tapped into that branch to some of the pretty more wild when I dived straight into the ground. Remember, this grass is dormant, so it's not very cushiony. I don't have a lot of complaints about this quad. I don't have complaints about the construction. It seemed very solid. I didn't have problems with durability. Like I said in the flight footage, it flew well. We have access to just about everything. But some of you may have seen this USB port right down here and thought, hey, how are you going to get USB access to change things? Well, you do that through the port in front. So they had that thought of, and I showed that in the quick specs, but in case you missed it, USB-C connector, that connects all the way down to the flight controller, so you don't need to get access to the USB port that's right off the flight controller. We also have easy access to the screws to adjust our camera angle, and you can see my camera angle. I did adjust that for the faster flight. That's where it's at. We have a good 3D printed mount, kind of standard. It's secured not only around the front post, but it's secured to the top plate as well. Hex screws all over the place. That's good. Initially, I only had one battery strap that it came with, and fishing the second one through here was a bit of an exercise, a bit of a pain. If you haven't done that before on quads, it can be a little bit challenging, but it's not impossible. You just need some smaller tools like tweezers and whatnot. I was a little bit surprised. I thought the gauge of the wires on the battery connector was awful small, and it doesn't have any sort of security as far as keeping the battery wires connected to the ESC. They're just straight off the ESC pads out the back. You can see here I've got a zip tie for my receiver, just kind of holding it up there. That's not really much tension. The only tension that you might get on a battery ejection is if it pulls it against the carbon fiber. That creates a little bit of a friction point. But if you have a really bad crash, we're going to have to rely on the 3D print stopping that battery from ejecting all the way out and pulling as hard as it possibly can. It's a big variable, but it's there. Also, we have antenna placement, or abilities to place our antennas in these two spots, as well as a T-mount. My T-mount, because it's wide, wouldn't fit in these little holes. I could have melted these out with my soldering iron and then just put them in there. They're split, so that you have a little bit of an opening. See how I can get my hex driver in there. So they're split, so they'll hold many T-mounts. This particular one, because of the housing on it around the center part, it was just too thick, and I didn't want to melt this out. So I did not do that, but that's something that you may find that you need to do if you were to get this quad. Of course, if it's already got a receiver with it, I would presume that it's not only mounted, but the T-mount is also taken care of for you out of the box. We have an opportunity for a third. You would probably only use that if you're using like an 1100 or 1300 milliamp battery and you didn't have a naked GoPro or any sort of GoPro on the front. If you did put any sort of external HD camera, it will, you know, mount up a little bit, but if you lean it back much, that battery could be in the way. I did notice that if I lean my GoPro back much, that it would touch the battery, especially because they oftentimes have these bump outs on the back with the fans. Something to consider, but it's going to be a big variable depending upon what camera and the mounter you're using. For the CineWhoop or CineApe, I was really impressed with how this flew, and I was pretty happy with its overall flight characteristics. I can totally see that this would be one that I would prefer over the CineLog25. The main reason is that I think this prop protection is much more like the CineBot 30, and it will last far longer than the CineLog 25 will last. I just think that the way it's constructed with the metal posts around the thick carbon fiber and the materials that they've used, that this is going to last far longer than the prop protection on the CineLog 25. And quite honestly, I think it'll last longer than the prop protection on the CineLog 20 as well. So if you're looking at this size, I think this is one that needs to be seriously considered on your list. They have a bunch of different options and it ranges in price. I see here that the lowest cost option, which you get with 2 batteries, that is if you buy it directly from DarwinFPV. I think I've seen this listed on sites like Race Day Quads and stuff like that. I'll put links down in the video description to wherever I can find this available so that you can spend your money wherever you like. Not all of them will be affiliate links. I don't have affiliates set up with everyone. I don't go asking all the vendors. Sometimes I have affiliates that they just asked me if I wanted to have an affiliate. I was like, fine, I'll do it. But I don't always remember to make the links the way I need to. Anyways, they have the analog kit. Comes in around $192 depending upon the different options that you get. Of course, that comes with 2 batteries. They have other kits that go clear up to $1,000. So if you get the Avatar with the goggles, with the radio, and several batteries, I think that's like $1,092. So the price range really varies depending upon what sort of package you get. But looking at this quad, at this one that I flew, if I select that option for the walk snail and I do no batteries, I'm not going to include the receiver because I put my own receiver in here. So exactly as I got it, $259.99. Again, you have to add your receiver. So what, 20 bucks there? Again, as I said, if you're interested in the CineApe25 from DarwinFPV, I'll put links to where I can find this available. Probably quite a few places because this review is quite tardy. This is not a new product. I think this has probably been reviewed by others as much as a month ago. By the time I get this edited and posted, it might be a month and some days. Yeah, I work slow. I like to do a lot of different flights, and I enjoyed the process of working through indoor, outdoor, fast, slow, and crashing. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.